Welcome
Welcome.
to All the Things. I am Monique Bisson.
And I am Krista Bontrager, also known as Theology Mom. And
This is the show where we talk about all the things related to God, the Bible, and real life.
well, we got Kevin here.
I'm just glad to be here,
All right, so we want to let everyone know, make sure to stay tuned because later in the show, we're going to have a very important announcement that you're not going to want to miss. Today is the first day of a very important campaign that we are doing this month that we want to tell you about. But today's show, oh boy, we're going to talk about Israel. Israel, the Jews, and Judaism, and it's a complicated subject. I think I put in the title something like trying to bring biblical wisdom to an impossible situation. And it seems like no matter how we tackle it, somebody's not going to like it. So we are getting pulled in every which direction on this issue right now. So we're going to try to hopefully bring a little bit of clarity today.
Yeah, and not, uh, upset everyone. I guess upset is the word I'm going to use. But it's definitely an emotional topic, and
It's become one for sure.
it really has. And I get it. Like we want to make sure that we are, biblical and on the topic and approaching it from a position of scripture first. But it's amazing to me. I think when I think about the topic of Israel, how both sides will say, well, this is the biblical position, or this is where scripture lands on this, or and yeah, I think many people are just wondering what is the biblical position? How do we arrive at a place that's clear and cares about human life on all sides? So yeah.
Kevin, you want to jump in here?
I'm just here to be on my best behavior and to bring some hopefully some clarity to things, because we always talk about it. There's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of things that are trying to drive people emotions. But before we do, I just want to point to the fact of my American flag hanging up there, my shadow box with my ribbons for my military service. I just want people to I don't need anyone saying my allegiances are somewhere else, right? Because that is the easy dismissal when someone doesn't align with you or agree with your point is, oh, you must be bought and paid for, or a Zionist in this case, or you don't care, you're not America first, you're Israel first. All of these things to kind of discredit where your position might be. And so I just want to establish the point that I am a proud American and a devout Christian, and that is my position in which I'm coming from.
That's good. And today we're going to be hearing from Dr. Jeff Myers from Summit Ministries. His ministry a couple of years ago did some studies, some primary research on Gen Z and their evolving views on Israel. So we're going to be bringing in that research as well, because they are seeing a rise among Christian young people being influenced by a lot of these views that are prominent on social media when it comes to Israel, the Jews, and Judaism. And so we'll be playing some clips from an interview that Kevin did with Dr. Jeff when we were in Dallas back in April. And then we're going to kind of add our own commentary and fielding your questions in the chat. So if you have questions, you can put those in the chat. And this is really a conversation about discipling the next generation. We're getting a lot of questions from families needing help tackling these issues. We've done a lot of content on this. I will put a list in the YouTube description to a playlist of a whole bunch of conversations we've had related to the issues. And so if we don't cover the exact thing that you're hoping for today, you can check those out. I also put a link to my blog post on 15 things that I think Christians should be able to all agree on related to Israel. So I'll put that in the show description as well. So with that, let's just start by getting to know Dr. Jeff Myers a little bit and his work at Summit Ministries. Let's play that clip and just hear from him.
Kind of tell everybody about Summit Ministries and what you do.
Well, we are equipping and supporting this rising generation to embrace God's truth and to champion a biblical worldview.
That's awesome.
We do that through in-person programs that we have in Colorado and in South Carolina, and then we have outposts all over the world where we develop the curriculum, say for Christian schools or homeschool co-ops or public school release time programs for them to teach biblical worldview to young adults.
That's awesome.
But 2/3 of young adults who are significantly involved in church in their high school years no longer even attend church by the time they reach their mid-20s.
Wow.
Our goal is to flip that, and the students who come through the Summit Ministries programs get the top Christian thinkers. They have a chance to ask all of their hard questions. They live in community with other young leaders.
Yeah.
And it changes the course of their lives. Even 10 years later, 90% of them say they hold strong to a biblical worldview.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Praise God for that.
Yeah, what I love about Kevin just wants everyone to know.
I just want everybody to know.
Is we're America first, not Israel first. So what jumped out to me in that clip was that he said 2/3 of students who grow up in the church leave the faith. Now, I do know that studies say that some percentage of those students do eventually come back to the church, but it's an alarming number, and ministries like Summit, Impact 360, and others are really trying to do what they can to turn those numbers around.
Yeah. And I think it's really important work what they're doing. And even the numbers they talked about of the numbers of kids who go through their program who end up staying in the faith, staying in the church, it is a complete 180 from what the norm is. And so whatever they're doing, other people need to mimic what it is they're doing because their kids aren't leaving the faith when they get to college age. So.
Yeah, I appreciate Summit's work. They it's so intentional in how they are speaking into the lives of young people, and how they have their speakers speak into the lives of young people. And so, yeah, really good work. And I can see how, especially, when you get a young person and when you're very intentional in having those conversations and then, walking a road with them even after, they've left, why a young person would have the grounding to stay and not to be swayed by a lot of the cultural narrative that's happening right now.
Yeah. Another thing I think is interesting is that how this issue of kids walking away from their faith is tied. It's crazy, but a lot of it is tied to the Israel issue, which we're going to get into. It's crazy. You wouldn't think these two things would be tied together, but unfortunately they are. And I think that's why it's such a controversial issue, even for Christians, and it divides so many people in our nation and across the world. And so I think it's important for us to talk about it, which we're going to get into. But I think it's just important to point that out, that these two things are tied together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you made that point. So let's start with some definitions. It's, to me, always a good place to start the conversation and looking at some key terms that we're going to be using. I think it's first important to differentiate between the Judaism of the Bible and the Judaism of today, because those are not exactly the same things. It's kind of a Venn diagram, like there's some overlap, but they're not exactly the same. And this is what I mean by that. The Judaism of the Bible, of the Old Testament, and the Judaism that Jesus was born into was the Judaism of the Mosaic Law. It included the tabernacle, the temple, sacrificial system, priesthood, and key features that provided a means by which the Jewish people could have fellowship with the Creator. When the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, so a few decades after the death, burial, resurrection, ascension of Jesus, we see that, I think, I would say that God providentially used the Romans to dismantle the temple system by destroying the temple. And now, according to Hebrews chapter 9, there is one way for humans to get to the Father, and that is through his Son, Jesus Christ, and that he is the once for all sacrifice. But after the temple was destroyed, there was a certain kind of regrouping that the Jewish scholars and leaders needed to do. To What were they going to do to preserve their religion and their culture once the temple was destroyed? And so I'm not saying that the Judaism of today is totally different than biblical Judaism, but I think it's important to point out that there are some significant differences. And I did a whole podcast about this with a Messianic Jewish scholar, Dr. Golan Broshi. If you go on the playlist that I'm going to put in the description, you'll be able to see that discussion there, where we explain these two kinds of manifestations of Judaism. And so I think that's an important first point to put out there. Do you guys want to add to that at all while we're talking about definitions?
No, I mean, you basically took, what I was gonna say in terms of, rabbinical Judaism versus what we call temple Judaism. And I agree with you. I think anybody who looks at scripture and prophecy and understand what Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection accomplished, it's not a coincidence that all of a sudden the Jewish temple and the whole system of sacrifice is destroyed, because there is no need. The Lamb of God has been slain. The atonement has been made. And now there is no more atonement. There are no more lambs being sacrificed. As a Christian, we have to look at that and go, amen. Right. But for the Jewish people and the people who are still following Judaism, you have to have an answer now, because you're kicked out of the land, right? You're kicked out of Israel. You're scattered across the globe. There's no more temple. There's no more Levitical priesthood. All of that stuff is gone. And so, yeah, they had to come up with some other basically system to preserve their culture and their religion. And that's where we get rabbinical Judaism.
That was just going to be, I was going to clarify that. The fact that when you say rabbinical Judaism versus temple Judaism, the temple Judaism would have been the prior, and the rabbinical is what we're in
Yes.
now. I'm here for the normal folk. I'm here for the choir. And so, I'm just trying to make sure that we all understand the ordinary, that we understand.
I think another important term to define is what is a Jew, because being a Jew is many things. I liken it to a suitcase. When you open the suitcase, there could be a lot of things inside. To be a Jew can be an ethnicity. It can also involve in that being a culture. It can also be a religion. And for some people, it's all of those things. For some people, it's only an ethnicity. And for some people, it's an ethnicity plus holidays. And so this is why we can have atheist Jews or progressive Jews. And this is also why we can have Jewish people who are every ethnicity on the planet. You can have Chinese Jews and African Jews, Ethiopian Jews, and so the word Jew can be very complicated. And so although we cannot have an atheist Christian, there can be such a thing as an atheist Jew. And so I think that is confusing to a lot of people. But what we are talking about is people who have a connection either through their lineage and or through their religion to the ancestors of Judaism. I don't know. What do you think about that definition, Kevin?
Yeah, I think it's good. I was going to ask you, do you think for tonight's discussion, our primary focus is on ethnicity and like lineage? When we say Jews, I think we're referring tonight in our discussion more so ethnic and lineage.
Yeah,
Would you agree with that?
I would say so, probably.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, there is this whole conversation of whether the Jews are really the Jews and whether Europeans, the Ashkenazi Jews, are really Jews and all of that. We're not going to get into that tonight, but we're saying that we recognize that that debate is out there, but we're kind of going with the more mainstream position of, look, if somebody says that they have a connection to Abraham, we're going to just go with that. What are your thoughts about that, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I just go to the book of Acts. When you look at Pentecost and you see Jews from all around Asia and Europe had come back to Jerusalem for the festivals and Passover and all of that stuff. Jews were already spread out across Europe and Asia. We could say Asia, but that's like Turkey and the Middle East. And and so this idea that all of a sudden the fact that the Jews were in Europe was some type of like, gotcha, you're not from Abraham. Like we see in the Bible, they're already in Europe. When Paul is going around doing his journeys to spread the gospel, he's going around Europe, Southern Europe, and he's going into synagogues all around because they were already established there. So this idea that because these people came out of Europe, they're not Jews, that's just not that's not a very well thought out position or argument.
So I think it's also interesting. There's a video on my channel where I talk about how the early Christians still called themselves Jews. There's a
Yes.
number of places in the New Testament where it wasn't just because they became, followers of the way or disciples of Jesus that they stopped calling themselves Jew. So that I think it's perfectly appropriate for my Messianic friends, to call themselves Jewish Christians.
Yeah,
There's
because they're ethnically Jewish.
yeah,
That-
and that they come
they're-
from a cultural context and all of that. So, all right, one more definition, and that is Israel.
Mhm.
Israel is a nationality. It is a nation state. It is a country. You can be an Arab Israeli. You can be a Jewish Israeli. You could be a Christian Israeli. You can be all of those things. You can be from Africa. You can be from China. You can be from America. If you can prove they have a process you can go through to prove your lineage to Judaism. You can come immigrate into Israel and make aliyah. But Israel is a nation state. It is a nation state. It is a nationality, not an ethnicity. So I don't know. That's my definition. Kevin, what do you think about that?
No, I think that's good and helpful. I think I saw in the chat someone put this is helpful. I would just also say um, because people have this narrative that Israel is a white colonial state. I think it's important to understand that, yes, you had Jews from Europe who came down and resettled in the early 1900s, but you also have to remember that when Israel declared itself a state and all the Arab nations attacked it, the Arab nations also kicked out Arab Jews in their country. And so Israel is about 9 million people in Israel today. 2 million are Arab Muslims, and of the 7 million Jews, about half are like, Arab descent Jews, and the other half is what we kind of view as the European Jews. So it is a very diverse place in terms of, the people that are there. And even from being a Jew is not all from the European descent side or who look more like Europeans. You also have very Arab looking Jews as well.
And the Arab, you see, again, Arabs, they're on Pentecost. So Arabs were Jews in the first century, and they were among the first Christians. They're among the most ancient Christians.
Yes.
So Arab is not a religion.
No.
So, and to be an Arab is more of an ethnicity from a particular lineage.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So those are our definitions. This is how we're gonna proceed with the conversation.
I'm just taking notes so I can make sure I get it
Yeah.
right on my quiz.
And I'll just say for historical purposes too, I think it's also important to understand that Abraham came from Ur, and Ur is in modern day Baghdad. So so when we don't think that Jew and Arab is like this kind of he took Abraham and formed a new people, but Abraham was from Baghdad. So just think about that.
I think that's a very interesting distinction. And it always amazes me when you look at where some of the ancient cities were, to think that, being from Ur of the Chaldeans, and Ur is like present day Baghdad. And,
Yeah.
so what did that mean for that time then? And how do we think of like ancient people then today? Yeah, this is all very interesting.
Yeah.
You know what, in your conversation with Dr. Jeff, you asked him, should Christians support Israel, which I think is a lot of the conversation and question that I'm seeing through my social media feeds. And well, I also think that and maybe we can parse this out a little bit, is that when someone says, well, I support Israel, then that means I am for all the Jews everywhere and I'm going to support this. Like, it becomes this conspiracy where people tend to, I think, collapse all of Israel and all of the Jews. I don't know if you guys see that, but
Absolutely.
Israel kind of becomes this umbrella term for Judaism, the Jews, and the nation state all together, and you must support the whole thing in its totality. And so,
yeah.
Or hate the whole thing in its
hate the
totality.
yeah, or be suspicious of it.
Yes.
So, all right.
So
Yeah,
Kevin, before you respond and we talk about that, there is a clip of you asking Dr. Jeff this question. So I want us to watch the clip and then we'll come back and discuss it a little bit.
Why should Christians support Israel?
Well, I wrote a book on this topic.
Yes, you
It's
did.
called Should Christians Support Israel? And people ask me, what's the answer? I said, well, there's 130 pages between you and the answer to that question. So just go at it.
Yeah.
But the answer to the question is Christians who love Jesus and love applying a biblical worldview to every area of life should support Israel. That does not mean that we put our stamp of approval on everything that the nation state of Israel does.
Yes.
I love America. I don't agree with everything our government does.
Yeah.
In fact, that's part of my citizenship responsibility, is to say what I think, to be bold about it and bring the facts to bear.
Yeah.
But Christians should support Israel, first of all, because Israel is a significant part of God's plan for history. Second of all, Christians should support Israel because Christians support the truth. And we live in a world of lies surrounding everything related to Israel.
Yes.
And then I think third, Christians should support Israel if they're Americans because they actually love America. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about this in the show. But the ultimate target of radical Islamists is not the state of Israel. The state of Israel is tiny, 9 million people. There are more people who live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area than who live in all of Israel.
Yeah.
The ultimate target is the United States of America because of our constitutional way of life, which radical Islamists believe is in contradiction to how the Quran teaches them about Allah and how they are to live and operate their lives.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more and unpack some of this, Kevin, because why do you, let me ask you the question, why do you think Christians should support Israel? And what are your thoughts about how would you answer that question?
Yeah. I think Dr. Jeff gave some good answers. And some of that is going to depend on your theology, and we know Christians differ on their theology. But this is what I always go back to. When it comes to the Jewish people, I I think scripture is very clear. Not only does God have a particular affection for the Jewish people, but that he also has a future plan for salvation for the Jewish people, right? And I always go back to Romans 11. Romans 11, where Paul, if you look at the book of Romans, the first half, you can kind of tell Paul is addressing the Jews about how they view the Gentiles, right? All have sinned, right? There's no one is righteous, right? He's like, look, all of y'all need Jesus. And then the back half of Romans, he's almost referring, he's talking to the Gentiles. He's like, now don't think too highly of yourselves and think you're better than the Jews, right? And he's making this argument for the value of the Jews. And he talks about the natural branches being broken off, being the Jews. And because of their disobedience, we Gentiles have been blessed to be grafted in. Like we're the wild olive branch. We're not the natural branches, but yet we've been grafted into God's covenant, into God's kingdom, into God's family, because the natural branches rejected. But he talks about, he says, but this is a partial hardening of Israel. He said, unto the fulfillment of the age of the Gentiles. So when we look at the church today, and the church is overwhelmingly Gentile, right? The Jews are hardened. Most Jewish people reject Christ still, right? But he talks about a day when the natural branches are grafted back in, right? And so the fact that the Jewish people are still around today, and we know that the nation of Israel was created basically for their preservation after the Holocaust. Well, it started before the Holocaust, but it was a real thing after the Holocaust, right? We as Christians should care about the Jewish people and the state of Israel because we understand God's word and his promises and his declaration that there's a future hope, and when the natural branches will be grafted back in, there will be a revival of Jews coming to Christ and believing in Christ. And so as Christians, we should care about that. We should care about evangelizing to Jewish people and to the nation of Israel. And so that's on the theological side. On the American side, it's very simple. They're our closest ally now in the whole Middle East, right? We do things together. We share intelligence. We fight wars together. The people that hate them hate us. And so to make Israel our enemy really just makes no sense from any kind of geopolitical standpoint. You can't say I'm America first, but America first means Israel's my enemy. That there's no logic or reasoning behind that, other than drinking some Kool-Aid and some misleading propaganda of people who want to drive a wedge between those two things. And that's why I was saying earlier that it's ironic that Christian faith and the relationship to Israel is so tied together. Because kids who walk away from the faith typically have a very anti-Israel view, right? And it's because of the ideology that drives that.
Yeah. We're going to get into some of those numbers, but I think I want to make a clarification in light of the definitions that we just gave and Romans 11. I would say that Paul's use of the word Israel in Romans chapter 11 is a synonym for what we defined earlier as ethnic Jews.
Yes.
I don't see it as being a synonym for the current geopolitical nation state of Israel.
True.
And I think that that's where a lot of the confusion gets introduced. That Paul's use of the word Israel and that all Israel will be brought in Romans chapter 11 is the same thing, is that there's an equal sign to the modern nation state of Israel. And I would say, I don't think so.
No,
now,
I would say no. The nation state of Israel is a secular state.
yes,
Right. Led by Jews, ethnic Jews, but it's still a secular state. Tel Aviv is very close to San Francisco in terms of culture and LGBTQ acceptance, all of that stuff, right? So this is not a bastion state of Christian or even old Jewish righteousness. That's not what it is. What it is a safe haven for Jews. It is a preservation state for ethnic Jews, is what it is. And I believe that's one of the reasons Christians should care about it.
So, so that's the first clarification I want to make. The second clarification I want to make is that what Kevin just described as the view of Romans chapter 11, basically being that toward the end of the age, there will be a great revival or quickening of among the Jews, that they will come to see Jesus as the Messiah, is not a uniquely dispensational position. It is not out of step with being reformed. Kevin is reformed. And so there was a question in the chat of, do reformed people see this as different because of eschatology? My answer to that is no. That there is a large historic tradition within Christianity that Romans chapter 11 teaches that toward the end of the age, there will be a great revival of Jewish people who will accept Jesus as the Messiah. So this charge that, well, if you support Jewish people, you're just some weird, peculiar dispensationalist, blah, blah, blah. No, that's the historic Christian position. Dispensationalism, now we could debate that. I am not a dispensationalist, classical dispensationalist. I lean more toward a historical premillennialist, which in my opinion is the best reflection of the early church in the first few centuries.
Krista, I
We're
had
gonna
no
have
idea.
to link those definitions
Yeah.
in the description.
Yeah. So I've done teaching on this in the past of the different views of the millennium. I lean toward historical premillennialism.
Same.
And so it doesn't mean I'm a dispensationalist. Those are two different things. So I want to have that clarity, because there's a lot of weird internet rumors about dispensationalism. And even if you are a dispensationalist, doesn't mean that you blindly support everything that Israel does. That is another sort of pejorative thing that is put out there.
Or that if you're a dispensationalist, you follow the Left Behind series. Like,
you got all your eschatology from Left Behind. So when Dr. Jeff says that God's plan includes Israel, I'm a little bit agnostic about God's plan for the nation state of Israel.
Agree.
I am not agnostic about Paul's use of the term Israel to refer to what we called in our definitions today, Jewish people.
Yes.
And so I want to just make that clarification.
Yeah, because Paul starts off Romans 11 basically declaring that. He said, "I asked then, has God rejected his people?" Then he says, "By no means, for I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, a member of the tribe of Benjamin." And he says, God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. And so, yeah, he's talking about ethnic Jews. Some people try to say, well, Paul, when he says Israel, he's just meaning the church. It's like, no, in Romans 11, he's explicitly saying, I'm talking about Israelites. I'm talking about my physical brothers in the flesh, descendants of Abraham. And that's the argument that he's making there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's continue to hear from Dr. Jeff. I think you asked him a next kind of follow-up question, tying together, our friendship as a nation with the nation state of Israel, and how that helps us as we combat radical Islamists and how they target us in the West and how they see our friendship. So let's hear from Dr. Jeff, and then we'll have you comment.
From my background, one of the things I know from dealing with terrorist groups and jihadist groups is they refer to America as Rome, right? They still viewed things through a very ancient lens.
Right.
And it wasn't about Israel. It was about America. It was about Western civilization as a whole was their enemy.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so kind of expound on that as to why is America the enemy? Why is America the target of Islamic radicalization?
Well, I know you've spent a lot of time around people who hold to a Muslim faith.
Yeah.
So, but I think a lot of people who are watching, listening right now are like, yeah, I'm kind of familiar, but I don't know all the details of it. I think I can give it very quickly to sort of set the stage. According to Islam, every person who has ever been born was born Muslim, which means one who submits. You and I, according to Islam, were born Muslim. We're not Muslim now. That means we are in rebellion against Allah. The cure for rebellion, and this is in the Quran multiple times, is jihad. Jihad means resubmitting yourself to Allah. It's not like dedicating your life to Christ. It's more like recognizing that you are in rebellion and ceasing your rebellion. Here's the problem. A lot of Muslims, maybe 10% of Muslims in the world today, believe that jihad is a military command to Muslims.
Yes.
So if they see us, they don't say, really, brothers, I hope that you will commit yourself to Allah and cease your rebellion against him. They say, either cease your rebellion against Allah or we will kill you.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So all of your military experience in that realm is you being amongst all of these people who really believe that you are in rebellion against Allah, and they really believe that it pleases God to kill you.
Yes, yes.
So if you go to a place like the Palestinian territories, and I've been there many, many times, you walk in and you ask people, is Israel the little Satan? And they all say yes, 100%. Yes, Israel is the little Satan. And then you ask them, who's the big Satan? And they look at you a little bit shy because they don't want to offend the tourists.
Yeah.
But they will admit America is the big Satan.
Yeah.
So you are exactly right. The Western way of life, based on the Constitution, which is based on the founders' thoughts as they articulated in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, and that we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, goes against everything the Quran teaches about Allah. They believe the world can never move toward 100% Muslim domination until America falls. And America won't fall until Israel falls. That's the way, this is the way people process it at the moment. And even though they're two major different groups of Islam, both of them, and they would kill each other, they both have in common the idea that Israel is the ultimate enemy for now. America is the ultimate enemy in the future.
Yeah.
So if America is the ultimate enemy in the future and Israel is the immediate ultimate enemy, it starts to make sense of some of the things that we see happening on the news. Of why nations want to, in the Middle East, have historically wanted to go against Israel, but because of the first Trump administration and the Abraham Accords, there has been some acceptance among those nations that Israel is here to stay. They've won multiple wars, and that they have a right to exist. However, Iran is not down with that, and they have friends, Hezbollah and Hamas and others, that they fund that does not want Israel to exist. So much of what we are living through right now is that campaign of, does Israel have the right to exist? And our friendship with them is part of preserving the West. They are kind of the first line of defense.
Yeah. And this is what I'll say too about, so he's talking about those 10%. We largely refer to those as, the Salafist, and the militant part is militant Salafist. So that is kind of the ideological thread that sees that jihad the way that he's laying it out.
So what Salafist is a Muslim?
Yes. A Salafist is kind of like saying, it's like a denomination, or it's like saying what's Reformed. Reformed is a type of Christian, a theological framework, right? A Salafist is a theological framework of Islam, of Sunni Islam. And it's basically compared to a, crazy enough, it's referred to as a puritanical movement. It is like a reformation. It is saying um, Muslims have lost their way. They've gotten away from the Quran. And so they're doing a revival or a reformation to bring Muslims back to the Quran, which means they have a very literal meaning and interpretation. They follow the actions of Muhammad to a T. And if you know anything about Muhammad's life, you know that Muhammad was a warlord. He was a militant. He had an army. He conquered. So if you're going to follow in the footsteps of Muhammad, what does that look like? Right. And so that's where you get the militant Salafists from. And so I will say this, that because you talked about how these countries have made peace with Israel. Well, the Salafists would say because the leaders of these countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Egypt are just Western puppets who have betrayed Islam, right? So there's even a split there. The one nation that is all on board still was the Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic. But all that to say is that no, every Muslim doesn't think like this, but the strand that does is very committed. That's where you find Hamas. Hamas is from that theological framework, and Hamas had it in their charter when they were founded. Is their whole goal was the destruction of this Jewish state. It wasn't a two-state solution. It wasn't a peace agreement. Their goal was the destruction of the Jewish state, and so I think that's important for people to realize, and especially in the West, because in the West we tend to think that everyone is just like us. They think like us. They believe like us. And we don't stop to think about things from their perspective, right? And so from their perspective, they are destined by Allah to destroy the Jewish state. It's prophesied. They're going to destroy the Jews. And every time they try, they fail. And every time they fail, they cry victim.
Well, that's
and
the
that's
thing.
what yeah.
That's a very important point, because when I said earlier, Israel has fought multiple wars and won. And I feel like
Yes.
this is what a lot of people miss. It's not like the UN just gave Israel some land and that was the end of it. That's not what happened. Like that was kind of the push forward. Zionism was a growing sympathy and movement as a secular movement starting in the 1800s. But after the Second World War and the Holocaust, it was like, okay, let's, as the UN, create a safe harbor for Jewish people. All right, that's what we're going to do. Gave them some land. You know, we could debate whether or not that was the most just thing to do or whether it was executed in the best way. We could have all those conversations. But I think that what's lost on people is that Israel fought a war for that land, and they went up against multiple countries that were their neighbors and defeated them, and then defeated them again in the 60s, and then defeated them again and again and again. And so it's like any other country, we would say, look, they've won the war. This is what is. Like it or not like it, this is what is. And
I'll say this too, Krista. I think I want to add this, that given Israel's success in those wars, when they should, by all logic, they should not have won those wars. It only added to the mythology of God is behind this, and God is doing something here. Or God's hand is on Israel and on these people, and this is God's doing. It only led to the growth of that, because especially talk about like the 6-Day War and all of these wars where Israel has just gotten attacked by multiple countries at the same time from multiple directions, and they defeated all of them. And that has helped grow the mythology around the nation of Israel.
So let me ask this. So we heard you guys talking about like, the most important in like the imminent situation would be to get rid of Israel, and then next would be America, the West. But there are so many young people who are jumping on this bandwagon of down with the Jews and Israel and collapsing them with the Jews and things like that, and this full on support of anything anti-Jew. Do you think they just don't know that like hi like we need to get rid of Israel so then they can come and get rid of you, or is it part of something bigger? The more I hear you guys talk, the more I continue to think about things like the Red Green Alliance and all of that, and that's way too much to get into for this show. But I do think a question that I get all the time in regards to critical theory things is, well, do you think they just don't know? But now when I'm listening to this conversation, and young people who are just so on board with things that are anti-Israel, anti-Jew, do you think they just don't know that, that what the end goal is?
Um, I, I think we have to get into the Red Green Alliance because it plays a big part in this. It does, because you
See,
mentioned critical theory. So when I talked about young people why do young people
Krista
walk away
giving
from?
look at her smirk on her face. She's like, why they gotta go there? But I'm like,
Why'd I
I'm
let
just
these two people on
I'm
here?
saying, like, why do young people walk away from the faith when they go to college, and why is it tied to Israel? It is because of the critical theory and the colonial theory and all of this stuff, right?
uh-huh,
And they get painted with this view of Israel as a white, oppressive, colonial apartheid state, right?
uh-huh.
And
Where
it becomes a social justice issue. But
yes.
this is the thing. So I talked about how Israel defeated their enemies and Egypt and Jordan and Syria and Lebanon and Iraq. Well, what people need to realize is, I always say the Cold War never ended, y'all. America supported Israel. The West, Europe supported Israel. Who supported all those Arab countries? It was the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was funding and supplying Egypt with
Hmm.
weapons and arms and so this this push in this front, it has never ended. And so that whole Red Green Alliance, the red meaning communist and the green meaning Islamic, it goes way back, even around
Hmm.
this fight around Israel. And so when you move it from a battlefield perspective and you move it to an ideology of the university and the classroom, it's still the same battle, right? And so young people are getting indoctrinated with this false narrative about Israel being this white colonial apartheid state that is killing the brown Palestinians, and even good, well-meaning Christians fall for this narrative, um, in terms of, oh, we should, it's the poor people, and and Israel is just this evil, expansionist minded country. And the thing is, Israel isn't. Israel accepted a small sliver of land and said, we will take it. And they took that little piece of land. And they didn't take it from people. They took what the UN gave them from the when they sliced it up. And they said it's a small piece, but we'll take it. The minute they said we'll take it, we're declaring ourselves a state, the Arab nation says not over our dead bodies, and they attacked them. And whenever they attacked Israel, Israel gained territory and land from defeating them, right? And not only that, this is what people don't talk about. They're talking about the displacement and the Nakba, and the Palestinian people lost their land. What they don't tell you is that those Arab countries told those Palestinians to leave. They told those Arabs, because they weren't Palestinians, they told those Arabs to leave, to move, to get out the way, because we're going to go destroy Israel. And then once we do, you can go home. Well, what happened when you lose? And now those people can't go home, right? That's what they don't want to talk about, right? And so young people don't really know and understand the real history, or even today, the way they report the news, about the war in Gaza, right? They throw out words like genocide. Um, I I remember the first instance, as soon as the war started, they claimed that Israel had bombed the hospital and killed 500 people. And then a video came out of a Hamas rocket misfiring and falling down and hitting, not even, it didn't even hit the hospital. It landed in the parking lot of the hospital. And yet the news ran with Israel strikes hospital, 500 killed, because that's what Hamas said. And that's what people just run with, and they believe those things, right? People, they talk about genocide, but no one looks at the numbers and say, is a genocide really happening? They simply go off their TikTok, they go off their social media feeds, and they don't realize that war is about propaganda. War is about public opinion, because public opinion shapes public and international pressure, right?
So we're
And
going
we
to
just have
talk
a lot
more
of people
about
falling for that.
we're going to talk more about propaganda and information.
Okay.
I want to take a quick time out. I can't believe we're already in an hour. This is like the slow train today.
This is turning to informed takes.
Yeah, but
Well, I mean, and now we talking about the Red Green Alliance. I feel like I can just ease on in the room. I'm
not
ready.
Black church.
It can be. I got a tambourine.
So I want to take a quick break and let people know about our campaign, our mid-year campaign that started today. Here's Monique to tell us more about that.
Hey family, at the Center for Biblical Unity, the month of June is the time of year where we do a bit of extra fundraising to make sure we can finish this year strong and keep the ministry moving forward. The theme for this year's mid-year fundraising campaign is Grow the Family. We are looking to grow our family of donors and church partners who believe that the gospel message actually offers a better hope for unity than culture ever will. When you give to the Center for Biblical Unity, you are helping us to produce biblical teaching resources, you're funding podcasts, you're supporting us as we equip churches navigating through tough conversations on matters related to race, justice, and unity. You're also helping us to get the Los Angeles Statement on Race, Justice, and Unity into the hands of people across this nation. For this year's fundraising campaign, we have two main goals. We want to bring 30 new members into our Inner Circle donor community. Our Inner Circle is our family of monthly recurring donors who give at the $100 level. And we want to grow that community by 30 new members and bring 3 new church partners into our church partnership community. Now, while we have very real goals, we also want to give back to you. For your gift of any amount, you will receive 2 presentations. The first is from our 2025 Birmingham Conference on Justice. The second is our conversation on critical immigration studies. When you get $50 or more, you will receive a Petty Mo mug. And if you give $100 or more, we will send you our Spicy Christian t-shirt. This is my favorite shirt. I wear it all the time because I love to tell people that, hey, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus, but I also add a dash of spice. Now, joining our Inner Circle community, you will receive our Spicy Christian t-shirt, but you'll also receive all of the other perks that come along with joining our Inner Circle community. For more information on the Center for Biblical Unity's mid-year campaign, please go to centerforbiblicalunity.com and prayerfully consider how you can partner with us today. Bye, family.
All right, we'd love to have you join our Grow the Family campaign. Maybe you're already a monthly partner. Maybe the Lord has blessed you and you want to up your giving a little bit to the $100 a month level. That would be awesome and amazing. But we're also very appreciative of one-time gifts, or if you want to show a little bit about the ministry to your pastor and encourage them about partnership, they can reach out to Kevin for more information. Everything's on the website. You can get connected with us. Okay, back to the episode. All right, I want to get into the research.
Wait, hold on. Before we get into that, I want to
Sure.
address Becky W571. There was a question, and you and I both wrote in, "Hey, can you write a little something more?" And Becky wrote Deuteronomy 12:5. Becky, none of us have our Bibles like open with us. So if you, and I don't know that any one of us, like they might. Okay, I'm not the one to just be out here quoting Deuteronomy like off the top of my head. If you can just like write a little bit more clearly what your question is, that would be awesome, because then we can address it. I don't want you to think that we're just ignoring you. So I want to make sure that your question can get addressed. And that was it. Sorry, Krista, go ahead.
That's okay. All right, I want to get back to our conversation with Dr. Jeff and talk about the research and talk about some of the things that they found in their research about Gen Z when it comes to their beliefs about Israel. And he makes a very kind of shocking claim that Gen Z is the most anti-Semitic generation, and that a high percentage believe that Israel doesn't even have the right to exist, which leads me to all kind of questions of how did we get here? But
it leads me back to the Red Green Alliance.
So let's hear from Dr. Jeff, and then we will give our take on it.
I know you guys did a poll, and what came out of that was that Gen Z is the most anti-Semitic generation we've ever had. Kind of help us understand, how do we get here? Like, why is that the case?
Yeah, it was about 50% of Gen Zers said that they do not believe Israel has a right to exist. The other part of the poll, the reason we did the poll initially was we found that the Harvard University CAPS poll said that 60% of young adults in the United States of America said that Hamas was justified in slaughtering Israeli men, women, and children. They were justified, 6 in 10. Now, that number backed off a little bit after the October 7th, 2023 terrorist attacks, but it's back up now. And there's 3 different ways you have to process it. People who are on the left hate Jews because Israel, they say, is colonialist.
Yes.
They colonized in that area. It's an apartheid state. America's an apartheid state as well. America's a colonialist state as well, but America's too big to tear down, so we can tear down Israel, and that will prove our point.
Yeah.
Okay, that we are morally virtuous in believing that Israel has no right to exist because they didn't exist there before. Now, it's a crazy argument. There are people from 85 different countries who live in Israel, or 103 different countries speaking 85 different languages. It is as far from a colonialist empire as you will ever find anywhere in the world. None of the Muslim countries in the world, by the way, are diverse in that way. Not nearly that diverse. Okay, but that's sort of the way they process it on the left. People on the right are anti-Semitic, probably because it's just the world's oldest prejudice. There are 194 nations in the world. The only socially acceptable prejudice in all 194 of those nations is hating Jews.
Yeah.
So the people on the right, whereas the people on the left think about it as a colonial issue, the people on the right think about it as a conspiracy issue.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So everything is a conspiracy. The Jews run the entire world. They're secretly doing this. And the reason we know that they're secretly doing it is because there's no evidence for it. Therefore, it
must be true.
It must be true. So then there's a third group, and that's Christians. Whereas the people on the left are anti-Israel or anti-Jewish because of colonialism, the people on the right are anti-Israel because of conspiracy. There are many Christians who are anti-Israel because of the church. They say that the church replaced Israel, that Israel and specifically Jewish people no longer have any role to play in God's plan for the world. Those are the 3 reasons why. And it depends on where you're coming from politically and religiously, but it does seem like a lot of Christians just kind of want to get in on the act. Right? This is the one thing that can bring us all together, is that we all hate Jews. That's how they see it.
And it's amazing that this tiny group of people catches all of this kind of hate from
12 million people in the entire world.
Yeah. So
there are 120 Muslims in the world for every Jew.
All right, Kevin, that's quite a statistic you gave there at the end of there's 120 Muslims for every Jew. And, that's pretty stark. I think that when we're thinking about the rising generation, I appreciated Dr. Jeff's point of like why people have these suspicions about Jewish people or Israel can vary depending on their political perspective and where they're coming from.
Yeah. And I thought he did a great job of explaining that, because that's kind of what we see, especially, the left. And that's what we were talking about, the Red Green Alliance. Your kid goes to college, and all of a sudden your kid comes back. Not only do they disavow their faith, but all of a sudden, all of a sudden now they're anti-Israel as well. And then on, the Christian right, it is largely due to replacement theory, which replacement theory, and also this, I would call it somewhat childish understanding of the Jews killed Jesus, right? As if they don't understand, number one, prophecy. Number two, not every single Jew, was responsible for that. The first Christians were Jews. Jesus was a Jew. Like, trying to label the Jews with this label of the Jews killed Jesus, therefore we are against the Jews, as if somehow the Jews are uniquely evil in society or in the world. It's just, it just doesn't have a lot of biblical support. It just doesn't.
Now they would say, their rejoinder to that would say, well, they're not against biblical Jews, but they don't call them Jews. They would say the Jews today are different than. That's why they would say Jesus wasn't a Jew. Is it because the Jews today is a different group, different circle.
It's not the Jews, and we know this because of Paul's declaration about the future plan for the Jews. The Jews did not wipe off the face of the earth. The Jews did not disappear. The Jews are still here today.
And that we think that God has a plan for them,
Yes.
as we talked about Romans 11 earlier. But I think that this whole business about replacement theology, that's another kind of weird, at times goes into weird places in the conversation, just on the other end of the weird places that sometimes dispensationalism goes to. Like, there's these two extremes, and even amillennialists are not anti-Jew. Like, that's not inherent in the system of amillennialism, even though they think that the people of God consists of the church. A sane, biblically minded amillennialist will tell you, well, the church consists of the people of the nations, and some of those people are Jews, and that there are Catholics, who a mainstream Catholic position is that Romans 11 still has a plan to bring in Jewish people toward the end, that there will be a great revival. I mean, these are mainstream biblical concepts. But if you go on social media, you see these two extremes of extreme dispensationalism and extreme replacement theology, and it's peculiar. But really, the historic position has been the people of God consist largely of Gentiles. There are some Jews, and we've seen just since the Jesus movement in the 60s in particular, a doubling of how many Jewish people believe in Jesus as the Messiah. And there is there are more Jews today that believe in Jesus as the Messiah, I think, than there's been in history since the book of Acts. Like, you could say that we could be possibly at the beginning of a revival among Jewish people having their eyes open to who Jesus really is.
Yeah. And I think, that's something that we should, rejoice in as Christians. But I'll just say that either you're a Jew or you're a Gentile. Those are the two groups the Bible describes people.
Those are the two things available. Yeah.
Yes. And it's the thing. If you are a Gentile, and I'm going to say this to my white Christian nationalist people out there, if you are not Jewish, you are a Gentile. And if you are a Gentile, you are an unnatural branch grafted into God's covenant. If you are in God's covenant. But do not think highly of yourself. Do not think highly of your ethnicity or your heritage. You are an unnatural wild olive branch grafted in. The Jews are the natural branches, and you should not be haughty towards the natural branches, because only by their rejection do you benefit to get grafted in. And that was Paul's whole point, was mutual appreciation for one another, right? No one should be poking their chest out. No one should be thinking they're high and mighty. The Jews had the oracles of God and completely missed the Messiah. Gentiles, you were dead in your sins and trespasses and lost. You were far off and have now been brought near, and it's due to their rejection, right? And so that is the way we should approach this thing.
Let's get into talking about a point that you raised earlier, and that is the difference between truth and propaganda, because I think that's one of the things that makes it so tricky to even have this conversation. And I know that one of Charlie Kirk's big concerns was that Israel and, the MAGA version of the America First strategy was really losing the propaganda war. They're losing the war of public opinion. And I think that Israel, and I think even our own government, all governments engage in propaganda. The question is what propaganda reflects reality? What part of it is true? And that's not always easy for the average person to get to really know and differentiate between what is fake or false propaganda and what is the truth. And so I want to play the next clip from Dr. Jeff and then come back and talk a little bit more about this, because the way that it's being, a lot of these ideas are being processed in the public square, it really makes it difficult, because we don't know how to differentiate what is real and what is fake propaganda. So let's check out the clip.
So I know Charlie Kirk, before he passed away or was murdered, had concerns. And he wrote a letter to Benjamin Netanyahu stating his concerns that Israel was losing the war of public opinion. And and he kind of gave some, hey, this could help. Yeah. And Charlie's concern was it was the young people. And Charlie wanted to reach the young people. And you mentioned even when we started that there's a lot of misinformation out there that people believe. Kind of go into that and kind of explain, like, what is this misinformation that people are believing? Why is Gen Z, believing these things today?
Yeah. Well, I think the term I want to use, and I'll define it, is the term propaganda. So persuasion is giving someone ethical arguments to try to move them toward the truth.
Yeah.
Propaganda is using ethical arguments or unethical arguments to gain power over the hearer. So persuasion is about the truth, propaganda is about power.
Yeah.
Those are the big differences. Why do people, so many people fall for propaganda? I think first of all, they're predisposed to think that they know better. I mean, it's honestly, there's sort of a relativistic narcissism that is at the core of a lot of things today.
Yeah.
People will tell you, well, I did the research, I'm bringing the receipts. What do they even mean by that? That they've looked at the first 3 search results on a Google search page, let's be honest.
Yes.
Right? They are not informed about this. They don't even try to be informed. They take some kind of an existing prejudice and then use that as the basis for the way they see everything else.
Yeah.
That's not research, that's not thought, that's narcissism. Yeah. That's, I am the center of my reality, I get to define reality for myself, and I'm just telling you what my reality is.
Yeah.
Okay? So those people are almost 100% open to being targeted by propaganda. because whatever they hear, if it's not something that other people are saying, they automatically assume that it's true and that they are now smarter than everybody else because they have this new revelation.
Yes.
Now, and I'll be straightforward with you. And Charlie and I had a show on his podcast about this, and I don't think he would agree with the way I just framed that. But I have spent hundreds of hours with young adults going over all of these questions, and it's the first thing you have to struggle to do is get to a basis of factual reality. So we actually know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think that's where the propaganda comes from. I would say Christians are sometimes most susceptible because we assume that we'll feel what is true. And you don't always feel what is true.
Yeah.
But if you believe that you feel what is true, and then you see somebody showing pictures of children who look hungry, their apartment building got knocked down by a bomb.
Yeah.
How could your heart not be moved in compassion toward those people?
Yeah.
And it could actually cause you to short circuit some of the tough questions you got to ask, like, what is a just war? Is this war just? Are there parts of it that are just and parts that are unjust?
Yeah.
Those are very complicated questions that don't yield themselves very easily to how I feel about things.
Yeah.
I want to just jump in, and I love the fact that he brought up what is a just war at the end. And that's something I think that we don't talk about enough is there ever a time when war is just? What is just? What's a whole theory? Like there's books written on just war theory.
Yeah, we did a whole show on just war theory about a year and a half ago. So it's a whole thing. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I wish that we had more time to even go into just war theory. And maybe that's something we can revisit in the future to talk about, hey, when is the use of war or, physical force in that fashion just? And, we're able to defend that position, biblically and through a perspective of, protecting our national borders or, whatever else it comes in with that.
I think we have a generation that doesn't, that is kind of a missing piece to what's going on. Because I saw in the chat someone mentioned, hey, global war on terrorism, we killed over 1 million people. My response is, and that doesn't tell me anything. That's a number. And you can feel a certain way. You can say, oh, that's tragic. But the question is, were we just in waging the war on terror after 9/11? That's the question. And it's the thing too, like when you're in a position of leadership, when you're, George Bush after 9/11 and you're dealing with what just happened in New York, you've got 3,000 Americans dead. You've got 2 buildings knocked down, the Pentagon hit, and another plane in the ground. What's your response? What do you do? Right? It's easy to have hindsight for this young generation and be like, I'm tired of forever wars. But we didn't fly planes into our own buildings. Someone else did. Right? And as leaders of a nation, we had to respond. And the way to respond to that was the war on terror, which was designed to not only track down and take out those responsible, but the plan was, and the vision was to reshape that part of the world in a way to which that ideology doesn't get a chance to thrive anymore. That strategy, it didn't work, but at the same time, we also haven't had another 9/11, right? So something went right.
So Kevin, as we think about propaganda versus persuasion in Dr. Jeff's last comment that he made, I guess for me, a lot of that results in where are you getting your news sources? That's a conversation you and I have had a lot offline is like, you telling me you got to get better news sources. And I'm like, well, how do I know who's telling the truth? And I think one of the things I've used to gauge is like, who seems to have the most accurate information over the
Mm-hmm.
years, and like looking for trend lines and patterns over time. But I know that a lot of people just get their news sources honestly from viral videos and that kind of a thing. But it's really tough these days to know what's real when we hear about, you know, a bombing and a bunch of civilians were killed. It's really hard to know, well, is that really what happened? Like, what was the context and all of that? I don't know if you could speak
Yeah.
to that at all.
Yeah. Just know the source. When the Gaza Health Ministry puts out something, I'm going to be skeptical about the truthfulness of it because I know they're known for exaggeration and propaganda. Or when something hasn't been corroborated. Like, for instance, something happens and all of a sudden there's all this reporting and people throwing out numbers. And I'm just like, how can you even have numbers that soon? Like, it's just, there's this rush to information. So what I would tell people is just wait for judgment before you make a decision on what you're believing, especially when something first happens. Just sit back and wait and let the smoke clear. Um, and there's no perfect source, so you have to look at multiple sources, and you just have to ask good questions. I the Associated Press and Reuters, they have their biases. They're center left, but I want an article that's just gonna tell me what happened. Tell me the facts. Stay away from opinionated stuff. Stay away from the opinion column in the Washington Post or all these articles that have been written. Just what happened on this day. This happened. I got this quote from a source on the ground. You just want the news. Just tell me what happened, and I can make my own determination of what I think about it. But don't try to sway how I'm thinking, how I'm supposed to think about or see this thing. And so, yeah, you're gonna have to broaden your horizon. I'm not saying only listen to Fox News and the Daily Wire, but
Yeah.
you need to listen to Fox News and the Daily Wire. Al Jazeera, even though they're extremely biased and funded by Qatar, sometimes they do good journalism work. It's just you just have to. Is what I'm reading being honest with me, or is it trying to lead me in a certain direction? Is it leaving out key information? Um, and those are just you just have to think critically. And when you read across a wide variety of sources on a particular issue, you can have a better informed opinion rather than whatever is in your algorithm that is feeding you a particular narrative.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be honest, with my social media, I get more social media from things I disagree with because I interact a lot with things I disagree with. So my social media doesn't feed me a lot of pro or right wing conservatism. I get more. I get more things that make me want to interact with it because it's things I disagree with or push back on than I do in terms of an echo chamber of agreement. But most people's social media feed is an echo chamber of agreement and things they like and viewpoints they already agree with. And so just be leery of that. Know that your social media, regardless of what it looks like, isn't real life, and step out of that echo chamber and breathe a little bit and get in the real world. And try to back out of that some, and that helps bring clarity as well.
A service that I really appreciate is ground.news.
Yes.
It has stories and it'll tell you like if it's left leaning or right leaning or centrist, but it also helps you identify blind spots in your feed of like, hey, there's all these news stories on this topic that your feed isn't giving you. And it's kind of useful. Our friend Chuck Holton has good kind of daily streams on geopolitical stuff, and he's pretty critical of Trump at times. He's a pretty straight shooter I appreciate that. And so
Chuck's one of the best sources out there. Chuck is a former Army Ranger. Chuck knows his stuff, and he's very objective. Very objective.
yeah. All right, friends, it's been a long show. Thanks for hanging in there with us. And I do want to thank the young man who was a commenter tonight in the second half of the show. Thanks for engaging with us. We appreciate it. And hopefully this can all be a learning experience for all of us in humanizing each other and doing better as brothers and sisters in the Lord. So thank you, everyone. And we will be off next week. We will be dark, but we will be back in 2 weeks with, let's see, what are we doing in 2 weeks?
Conversation, I believe, with Honcho.
With Katie Faust.
Oh, Katie Faust. Okay.
About overturning Obergefell. And since it's Pride Month, an appropriate topic of her work, of the Greater Than campaign. So we'll be talking about that in 2 weeks. So we will be off next week, and we will see you, God willing, on June 15th. Thanks so much for watching. Grace and peace, everyone.
Bye, guys. There's nothing left.